research, are there aspects of the game from previous eras that you wish would have carried on to what the game we're seeing today? Is there anything that, that through the games that you selected, just aspects from on the floor, even off the floor, from way maybe the media covers, just the NBA itself, that's been lost through time that you maybe that should be brought back into the modern game that we see today?
Yeah, I mean, reporters had great access to, like they would sometimes fly on the planes with the players and stuff like that. I wouldn't mind seeing that come back. Certainly, the NBA at the time was, they needed the coverage. They were still behind the NFL and baseball firmly in terms of coverage, and they needed to get as much coverage as possible. But, I think the one thing that I'd like to have seen change is that I would like to have seen international players come into the league earlier. I cover a little bit in the Dirk Nowitzki chapter. I talk a little bit about Arvydas Sabonis, and he didn't wind up getting into the NBA until he was pretty much a spent force. He wasn't. Right. He wasn't. He wasn't himself. But when you talk to people or you read accounts of how good he was in the early 80s, man, I would have loved to have seen him have a full NBA career. And there was this great Yugoslavian teams with Drazen Petrovic and Dino Raja, Tony Kukoc, Vlade Divac. If those guys could have come to the NBA earlier, I would have liked to have seen the international game be incorporated to the NBA earlier. I think that would have been, really interesting to see how some of those players fared.
Sean, transitioning now to present day, who are you excited to watch this season, whether it be contender or up-and-comers?
Yeah, I mean, the two teams that were in the finals last year, this is not something that we usually see. It had the most dramatic off seasons.
Yeah,
with and it was hard to top Brooklyn's off season, right? I mean,
Right.
After everything that the Nets went through.
Yeah.
But how did the Celtics come back with Joe Mazzulla as their coach? This guy is never really been a head coach except at Fairmont State in the hills of West Virginia, and he's going to come in and take over a team that went to the NBA Finals. Oh boy, that's a huge story. And then the Warriors, with all this stuff hanging over them now, this punch from Draymond Green, and sort of what it signifies something bigger, and that is that this team is going to change because Draymond Green is going to be a free agent next year. You're going to have Klay Thompson the year after that be a free agent, and they gave big extensions to Poole. And Andrew Wiggins. How does all that affect that team? So, the two best teams in the league, are really looking at all this drama this year. And I think that sets up, a fascinating year in both of those cities. So you don't usually get to see something like that, but that's where we are in the league. And like I say, I think there's probably, 10 teams that have a legitimate shot at winning a championship this year.
Yeah, I think when we talk about NBA drama, at least in the conversation, the Warriors that you mentioned, Steph getting a 5th title, I think makes legacy conversations all the more interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot that, especially Steph, I think there's a lot of pressure on him to help them overcome this. He's not the most vocal leader at all times, but he's going to have to be. And I'll be interested to see how he responds to all this.
To that point, this previewing this season, you mentioned there's like 10 teams in the running for the title. Fans they're usually pretty fickle in terms of, there's kind of two camps. Some like the parity, some like just the dominance. What do you think is best in terms of the league? I believe that parity's the best. More teams the merrier in terms of being a contender. But how do you feel about that in terms?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's been. I think, the Miami Heat were interesting as a super team, and the Warriors were the first couple of years, but then it was just the Warriors every year. And I think people got tired of that. I got tired of that. So, yeah, I mean, I do think that to come in with the possibility of, like I say, double digits at least teams. I think that's much more interesting. A third of the league. That was something that we just didn't, we just didn't see that 10, 15 years ago, even 5, 6 years ago when the Warriors were on their roll. We just haven't seen this in a while, where you could have Milwaukee, we could have Miami. I mean, Miami was within a Jimmy Butler three-pointer last year of being in the finals themselves. Obviously Philadelphia's made big changes. I mentioned the Warriors, the Grizzlies, the Nuggets should be, now with Jamal Murray back. The Suns, of course, people forget about the Clippers getting Kawhi Leonard back. I mean, you go right down the list. There's a lot of teams that feel like they have a chance to win this year, and they should.
So I hope that you had a great time, a great holiday if you celebrate that with people you care about. And I hope you're having a great weekend. Thank you for tuning into the show. Wanted to mention just a few things real quickly that we are grateful for on the show. First and foremost, we have had lots and lots of reviews coming in on the show. We've had a lot of feedback on social media, email, and otherwise. Just that you guys are really enjoying the show, and just wanted to give a heartfelt and sincere thank you, because this show is not possible without you guys. We really appreciate you being involved in the conversation, and it means a lot to us that you enjoy the conversations that we're having with the guests that we're interviewing. So thank you first and foremost to you. We love doing this show for ourselves, for one thing, but also more importantly for you guys and the audience that we value. So thank you. Also want to say thank you to the Underdog Podcast Network. It has been a great relationship for us since we joined them this season. Really appreciate the stuff that they do, supporting us and promoting us as well. So with that, I wanted to talk about, we talk about so many dramatic things. We've talked about like the Kyrie Irving news. We've talked a lot about the Lakers and things that are fun to talk about, no doubt, but they kind of have a negative spin to them. You might even think that we are negative people at times on the show, as you may think about media in general. I would say in large part, I agree with that about media in general, but Justin and I are pretty positive dudes. And I wanted to do an episode, and maybe it's cheesy with it being Thanksgiving weekend and all that, but an NBA gratitude list, things that I sincerely enjoy about the NBA season so far, beyond all these major headlines and, kind of maybe like sickly in a way, enjoying the drama. Some genuine, good, positive things that are happening around the league that I really enjoy. And most of that is, of course, the product on the court, which is outstanding. So we're going to talk about that, focus on that this show. I have 3 different categories that I want to go over. The first one being the NBA try-hard teams. There are teams right now in the standings in both the Western and Eastern conferences that just have no business being where they are. And we do have, it's a small sample size. We're just under a quarter of the way through the season. So I know some of these standings will change, and we've said as much on the show, but I do want to give a shout out to some teams that are placing right now where they shouldn't even be placing. And also say thank you for it not being a total tank fest like people were talking about. You look at, for example, in the East and West, both the Pacers and the Jazz were teams that was like, oh, we are seeing a full-on front office tank going on between the Pacers and the Jazz. And the Pacers are 5th in the Eastern Conference right now at 10-7. So almost a 60% win percentage. And the Jazz are 12-7 and sitting 2nd in the West as we speak. And these teams do not have an overabundance of talent by any means, but these teams, especially the Jazz, are playing hard and playing with and for each other under their coaching. And I think they have caught the league off guard so far, certainly, especially the Jazz. And I think there's legit backing to the idea that the Jazz anyway are most likely going to at least be in the play-in tournament. I think teams will catch on to things that they're doing. And, as we get closer to the All-Star break. And then beyond that, teams are going to knock the Jazz back a bit and know what they're doing, because at the end of the day, you don't have a supremely talented team there. So teams that are vying and pushing for better playoff spots are going to take advantage of that. But have to give those two teams in particular a huge shout out. Other teams that I want to mention, the Wizards are right behind the Pacers in 6th place in the East at 10-8, 6-4 in their last 10. Pretty impressive for the Wizards. Kind of another sort of ragtag group of players that are performing better than the Knicks, who are right behind them at 7th. Not terrible for the Knicks. I think better so far than last year, in spite of all the drama and all the questions that are going on there. That, you know, we recently talked with Jeremy Cohen about all that. So you can check out that interview if you want more about the Knicks. The Raptors, we had a recent interview with Iman Adan. She gave great analysis on what's going on with the Raptors, but they are a team that deserves a nod for being a try-hard team. Pascal Siakam has recently been injured for the last few weeks, and they're still 4-6 in their last 10, a team that is hustling, trying hard, very fun to watch. So those teams that I mentioned there, that 5 through 8, they are above the 76ers right now. They are above the Nets right now. They are above the Bulls, who were a very good team last year, still a very good team. And they are also above the Heat, who the 76ers are right at 500, but the Nets, Bulls, and Heat are below 500. You would expect those teams to climb in the standings based on their experience and based on some more stability coming into play. But total surprise through the first quarter of the season, how the standings have played out. The Cleveland Cavaliers were predicted to be a very good team in the East, and they have delivered. They are 3rd, sitting at 12-6. So shout out to those teams in the East. Looking specifically in the Western Conference, beyond the Jazz, sitting in 2nd place, as we mentioned, the Pelicans were projected to be better this season, and they are tied for 4th place. The Kings, have to mention the Kings. 8-2 in their last 10 games, and they just had their 7-game winning streak snapped. They'll be playing the Celtics next, so that might be another loss if the Celtics bring it. But all in all, a great run for the Kings early on here. Of course, we have trust issues with the Kings, but you see that fan base getting rejuvenated. You see they started the Light the Beam, where they light this giant purple beam that goes like straight into the sky after they win games. So it's this new home court tradition for those fans in Sacramento, which I think is really cool. And if you haven't seen it, look up pictures for it, Google it, because it looks pretty awesome. Grizzlies have been a try-hard team for a while now, ever since John Morant came in, but especially since last season. And they are still one of those teams that is just hustling and overperforming, whether or not they have John Morant on the court. The Trailblazers, I think, deserve a huge nod here in this try-hard team categorization. They are 10-8. They are tied with those Grizzlies for 7th place. They have struggled and they've lost 4 in a row, but it shows you how quick they came out of the gates as well, going 10-4 in the first 14. So all those teams that I mentioned right there are sitting above the Mavericks, who are, you know, one of the top contenders in the West. All those teams 10 and up in the rankings in the West are above 500, which is pretty cool to see. The Thunder are also a try-hard team. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a low-key MVP candidate right now. This is not a rollover Thunder team, which is really impressive given what we talked about last year when the Thunder had, I believe it was the biggest home court loss in NBA history that came at the hands of the Memphis Grizzlies, who were without Ja Morant at the time, if you remember that episode from last season. So the Thunder, in spite of not having Chet Holmgren, really, really impressive, sitting at 7-10. And yeah, they're probably not going to be a play-in team unless Chet is able to come in sooner than expected, like early in the spring. Probably not going to happen. Yes, they probably are still low-key front office tanking for picks, but those players are playing hard and they are no longer a rollover team. Unlike, my Rockets, who are still really young, they're sitting at the very bottom of the league right now, somewhat of a rollover team, even though they are trying hard and they are slowly making some improvements. So very cool to see, very encouraging around the league. Guys, let me know in the comments or shoot us an email for mailbag episodes. Are there any try-hard teams that I missed on that list that I didn't specifically designate as a try-hard team?